Hey there, and welcome back. I'm Elizabeth, and today we're diving into something that might sound a little controversial at first. We're talking about getting rid of your management team. Now, before you think I've lost my mind, hear me out. This isn't about chaos or eliminating leadership. It's about rethinking how we structure organizations to actually get better results, faster decisions, and happier teams. So let's start with a question. How many layers of management does your organization have between the front line and the CEO? If you're like most mid-sized companies, it's probably 3, 4, maybe even 5 layers. And here's the thing, every single one of those layers slows you down. Every layer is a place where information gets filtered, decisions get delayed, and accountability gets fuzzy. According to research from Harvard Business Review, the average organization has added more than 50% more management layers over the past 3 decades. We've gone from an average of 4 layers to 6 or 7 in many companies, and each layer adds an average of 2 to 3 days to decision-making time. That adds up fast. I've seen this play out time and time again. A frontline employee spots a problem or has a great idea. They tell their supervisor. The supervisor thinks about it, maybe mentions it to their manager. The manager brings it up in the next leadership meeting. By the time it gets to someone who can actually make a decision, weeks have passed. And you know what happens? Either the opportunity is gone or the problem has gotten worse. And here's something that really gets me. Studies show that about 60% of good ideas from frontline employees never make it past the first management layer. 60%. Think about all that lost innovation, all those missed opportunities to improve operations or serve customers better. It's sitting right there in your organization, but your structure is blocking it. Let me share a real example. I worked with a manufacturing company that had 5 layers of management. They were struggling with quality issues on the production floor. The line workers knew exactly what was causing the problems. They'd been talking about it for months. But by the time that information filtered up through supervisors, shift managers, plant managers, and operations directors, it was so watered down that leadership didn't understand the urgency. Here's what actually happened. The line workers identified that a specific machine calibration was off, causing defects in about 8% of units. They reported it in week 1. By week 4, it had made it to the plant manager as a vague concern about quality trends. By week 8, when it finally reached the operations director, it was presented as a general training issue. Meanwhile, they'd produced over 50,000 defective units. It took a major customer complaint and a threatened contract cancellation before anyone took action. When they finally listened to the line workers and fixed the calibration, the problem was solved in 2 days. Just 2 days, but it cost them nearly $200,000 in scrapped product, overtime to remake orders, and damaged customer relationships. That's expensive, that's frustrating, and it's completely avoidable. And we're not just talking about small decisions here. A study by Bain & Company found that companies with fewer management layers can move from identifying a market opportunity to launching a product in half the time. In fast-moving industries, that's the difference between leading the market and playing catch-up. Research tells us companies with flatter structures make decisions up to 5 times faster than their hierarchical counterparts. 5 times, think about what that means for your competitive advantage. While your competitor is still scheduling meetings to discuss the meeting about the decision, you've already implemented, tested, and refined your solution. But speed isn't the only benefit. Let's talk about engagement. Gallup research consistently shows that employee engagement drops significantly in organizations with multiple management layers. Why? Because people feel disconnected from decision-making. They feel like their voice doesn't matter. They see bureaucracy instead of impact, and disengaged employees cost you money. They're less productive, less innovative, and more likely to leave. Let me put some numbers on this. Gallup estimates that disengaged employees cost the U.S. economy over $500 billion annually in lost productivity. And here's the kicker. Organizations in the top quartile for employee engagement see 23% higher profitability than those in the bottom quartile. 23%. That's not a rounding error. That's a fundamental competitive advantage. When you have multiple management layers, engagement scores typically drop by 10 to 15 percentage points for every layer you add. So if you've got 5 layers, you could be looking at engagement scores that are 40 or 50 points lower than they could be. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, but Elizabeth, we need managers to coordinate work, to develop people, to maintain standards. And you're absolutely right. We do need those functions, but here's the key insight. We don't need dedicated management positions to accomplish them. We need leadership distributed throughout the organization. Let me explain what I mean. In a traditional hierarchy, managers are responsible for their team's performance. They make decisions, solve problems, and handle conflicts. The team members execute. But what if instead we empowered teams to manage themselves? What if we gave them the training, the authority, and the accountability to coordinate their own work, develop each other, and maintain their own standards? This isn't some pie in the sky theory. Companies are doing this successfully right now. Take Morningstar, the world's largest tomato processor. They have no managers. Zero. Instead, they have colleagues who make commitments to each other and hold each other accountable. They've been operating this way for decades, and they're incredibly successful. Their productivity per employee is significantly higher than industry averages. Let me tell you more about how Morningstar actually works, because it's fascinating. Every employee writes a personal commercial mission statement. It's basically their commitment to what they'll deliver to their colleagues and the company. Then they negotiate detailed agreements with the colleagues they work with most closely. These aren't vague promises. They're specific commitments about deliverables, timelines, and quality standards. If there's a disagreement, colleagues work it out directly. If they can't resolve it, they bring in a mediator who's a peer, not a boss. And here's what's remarkable. Their employee turnover is less than 4% annually in an industry where 15 to 20% is typical. Their revenue per employee is roughly double the industry average. They process over 40% of the tomatoes in California with a fraction of the overhead costs of their competitors. This isn't theory. This is a multi-hundred-million-dollar business that's been proving this model works for over 30 years. Or look at Haier, the Chinese appliance giant. They transformed from a traditional hierarchy into a network of small autonomous teams. Each team operates like a mini business, making its own decisions about products, pricing, and hiring. The result? They went from a struggling state-owned enterprise to a global leader. Innovation accelerated, speed to market improved dramatically, employee satisfaction soared. And here's what's really impressive. They reduced their product development cycle from 18 months to just 9 months. They increased their revenue per employee by over 40%. These aren't marginal improvements. These are game-changing results that came directly from flattening their structure and empowering their teams. So, how do you actually do this? How do you move from a traditional management structure to something flatter and more empowered? Let me walk you through the key steps. And I want to be practical here because I know this can feel overwhelming. First, you need to be crystal clear about decision rights. In traditional organizations, it's often unclear who can make what decisions. In a flatter structure, this clarity is essential. You need to define what decisions teams can make autonomously, what requires consultation, and what needs broader input. The goal is to push as many decisions as possible to the people closest to the work. Let me give you a concrete example. I worked with a retail company that created a decision matrix. They identified about 30 common decision types, from scheduling shifts to ordering inventory to handling customer complaints. For each one, they specified whether the team could decide independently, needed to consult with others, or required broader approval. This simple tool eliminated about 70% of the decisions that were previously escalated to managers. Teams could move faster, and they felt trusted. That trust translated directly into better customer service and higher sales. Second, invest heavily in capability building. When you remove management layers, you're not removing the need for management skills. You're distributing them. That means everyone needs to develop skills in problem solving, conflict resolution, project management, and strategic thinking. This requires significant investment in training and development. But here's the good news. When you eliminate management positions, you free up budget to invest in developing your entire workforce. I've seen companies redirect 15 to 20% of their payroll costs from management salaries into comprehensive training programs. We're talking about workshops on facilitation skills, courses on financial literacy so people understand business metrics, training on how to give and receive feedback effectively. One company I worked with created a peer coaching program where employees were trained as coaches for each other. And what happened? People started solving problems on their own because they actually had the skills to work through issues together, and engagement scores went up because people felt invested in. Third, redesign your information systems. Managers often serve as information brokers, collecting data from their teams and reporting up. In a flatter structure, you need transparent systems where everyone can see relevant information. This might mean dashboards that show real-time performance metrics, shared databases where anyone can access customer feedback, or regular all-hands meetings where leadership shares strategic context. Think about what information managers typically control: budget data, performance metrics, customer feedback, strategic priorities. In a flat organization, all of this needs to be accessible. I worked with a software company that implemented what they called radical transparency. Every employee could see the company's financials, every team's performance metrics, and every customer satisfaction score. At first, leadership was nervous. What if people misinterpret the data? What if competitors get access? But the benefits far outweighed the risks. Teams started making smarter decisions because they understood the business context. They could see how their work connected to company goals. And when everyone has the same information, you eliminate the politics and speculation that often plague organizations. Fourth, create new accountability mechanisms. Without managers to monitor performance, how do you ensure accountability? The answer is peer accountability and transparent metrics. When teams are responsible for outcomes and everyone can see the results, peer pressure becomes a powerful motivator. Nobody wants to let their colleagues down. This often creates stronger accountability than traditional management oversight. Here's a specific example. A logistics company I worked with moved to team-based accountability. Instead of individual performance reviews, teams were accountable for collective metrics like on-time delivery rates and customer satisfaction. They published these metrics weekly where everyone could see them. What happened? Teams started self-organizing to solve problems. If someone was struggling, their teammates jumped in to help because they all shared the outcome. Underperformance became a team conversation, not a manager's problem to solve. And interestingly, they found that peer accountability was actually more effective than manager oversight because it was immediate and continuous, not just an annual review. Fifth, rethink compensation and career paths. In traditional organizations, the path to higher pay and status runs through management. If you eliminate those positions, you need alternative ways for people to grow and be rewarded. This might mean creating expert tracks where individual contributors can reach senior levels, implementing skill-based pay systems, or offering equity participation based on team performance. I've seen companies create multiple career ladders. You can advance as a technical expert, as a project leader, as a mentor and coach, or as a business developer. Each path has clear criteria and comparable compensation. One tech company I worked with implemented a skill-based pay system where people earned increases by demonstrating new capabilities, not by managing others. They defined about 50 key skills across technical, business, and interpersonal domains. As people developed and demonstrated these skills, their compensation increased. This created a culture of continuous learning and removed the pressure to pursue management roles just for the money. Now, let's address some common concerns. What about coordination across teams? In a traditional hierarchy, managers coordinate. In a flatter structure, you need other mechanisms. This might be liaison roles that rotate among team members, regular cross-team meetings, or digital collaboration platforms. The key is designing these coordination mechanisms intentionally, rather than assuming hierarchy will handle it. Let me tell you about a healthcare organization I worked with. They eliminated their department manager layer and were worried about coordination falling apart. So they created rotating coordinator roles. Every quarter, someone from each team would serve as the liaison to other teams. These coordinators met weekly to share information, identify dependencies, and solve cross-team issues. Because the role rotated, everyone developed a broader perspective of how the organization worked. And because coordinators were still doing their regular work, they stayed connected to reality. They weren't becoming a new management layer. They were just facilitating coordination. What about developing future leaders? Some people worry that without management positions, there's nowhere to develop leadership skills. But actually, the opposite is true. When everyone has the opportunity to lead projects, facilitate meetings, and make decisions, you develop leadership capability throughout the organization. You're not limiting leadership development to the chosen few who get promoted into management. Think about it this way. In a traditional organization, maybe 10% of your people get to develop leadership skills through management roles. In a flat organization, everyone develops these skills because everyone leads in different contexts. You might lead a customer project this month, facilitate a problem-solving session next month, and mentor a new colleague the month after. This distributed leadership model creates organizational resilience. You're not dependent on a few key managers. You have leadership capacity everywhere. What about performance management? Without managers to conduct reviews, how do you evaluate performance? Many flat organizations use peer feedback systems, where team members evaluate each other. Others focus on team outcomes rather than individual performance. Some use a combination. The key is creating systems that provide honest feedback and support continuous improvement. I have seen this work really well when it's done right. One company implemented a 360 feedback process where everyone received input from teammates, collaborators from other teams, and the people they served, whether internal or external customers. The feedback was frequent, maybe quarterly instead of annual, and focused on specific behaviors and contributions. People found it more valuable than traditional manager reviews because it was more comprehensive and more timely. And because everyone participated in giving feedback, people developed better skills in having honest, constructive conversations. The culture shifted from evaluation to development, which is exactly what you want. Let me share another example. I worked with a professional services firm that eliminated their middle management layer. They went from partners, senior managers, and associates to just partners and associates. Initially, there was anxiety. Senior managers worried about their careers, associates worried about losing support and guidance. But here's what happened. They created project-based teams where associates took on significant leadership responsibilities. They implemented a mentoring system where every associate had a partner mentor. They created transparent project dashboards so everyone could see performance metrics. The transition took about 18 months, and they were very intentional about it. They started by identifying the actual work that middle managers were doing. About 40% was administrative tasks that could be automated or eliminated. Another 30% was coordination work that could be handled through better systems and regular team syncs. The remaining 30% was genuine coaching and development, which they redistributed through the mentoring program and peer learning circles. They also created what they called decision playbooks. These were clear guidelines that spelled out exactly what decisions associates could make on their own, what required partner consultation, and what needed broader team input. This eliminated the ambiguity that often paralyzes flat organizations. Associates knew they could adjust project timelines within a 10% buffer without asking permission. They could bring in subject matter experts from other teams as needed. They could even push back on client requests if they felt it compromised quality results. But here's what really surprised them. Their revenue per employee increased by 23% within 2 years. Why? Because they had eliminated a layer of overhead, yes, but more importantly, because associates were taking on more complex work earlier in their careers. They were developing skills faster. They were building client relationships directly. The firm became more profitable and more competitive in attracting top talent who wanted responsibility and impact, not just a paycheck. Decision-making speed increased dramatically. Client satisfaction improved because teams could respond quickly without waiting for manager approval. Associate engagement went up because people felt more ownership and impact. And here's the kicker. The former senior managers, most of them thrived. Some became partners faster because they were now directly generating client value instead of managing. Others discovered they preferred hands-on work and became highly valued senior associates. A few left for management roles elsewhere, which was fine. They weren't the right fit for the new model. Now, I want to be clear about something. This isn't right for every organization. If you're in a highly regulated industry where strict oversight is required, you might need more structure. If you're managing a workforce that's geographically dispersed with limited technology, coordination might require more formal management. If your culture is deeply hierarchical and resistant to change, the transition might be too disruptive. I've also seen flat structures struggle in organizations where the work is highly specialized and requires deep technical oversight. For example, a pharmaceutical company doing drug development needs layers of review for safety and compliance. You can't just empower a team to make autonomous decisions about clinical trials. Similarly, if you're managing a large-scale construction project with hundreds of subcontractors, you need dedicated coordination roles. The key is being honest about what your organization actually needs versus what's just tradition. And let's talk about scale for a moment. Some people argue that flat structures only work for small companies. That's not true, but it does get more complex as you grow. Companies like WL Gore, the makers of Gore-Tex, have maintained relatively flat structures with thousands of employees. But they do it by organizing into small units, typically no more than 150 to 200 people per facility. Each unit operates with significant autonomy, so you can scale flatness, but you have to think about it differently than traditional hierarchies. For many organizations, especially those in dynamic industries where speed and innovation matter, flatter structures offer significant advantages. The question isn't whether it's possible. We know it is. Companies are proving it every day. The question is whether you're willing to do the hard work of redesigning your organization. Because, let's be honest, this is hard work. It requires rethinking fundamental assumptions about how organizations operate. It requires investing in people's capabilities. It requires leaders who are willing to give up control and trust their teams. It requires patience because the transition takes time and there will be bumps along the way. You'll have people who struggle with the increased autonomy. Some will make mistakes they wouldn't have made under closer supervision. You'll have moments where coordination breaks down and things fall through the cracks. You'll have leaders who say they support empowerment, but then micromanage anyway because old habits die hard. These challenges are real and you need to be prepared for them. The key is creating safety nets. Build in regular retrospectives where teams can discuss what's working and what's not. Create peer support systems so people aren't figuring everything out alone. Celebrate the learning that comes from mistakes, not just the successes. And be willing to adjust your approach based on what you're learning. This isn't about implementing a perfect system. It's about continuous evolution towards something better. Think about it this way. In a traditional hierarchy, your organization's intelligence is concentrated at the top. You're limited by how much your senior leaders can process and decide. In a flat structure, you're leveraging the intelligence of everyone. You're tapping into the insights of the people closest to customers, closest to problems, closest to opportunities. That's exponentially more brain power applied to making your organization successful. Payoff is worth it. Faster decisions, higher engagement, better innovation, lower overhead costs, more resilient organizations that can adapt quickly to change. These aren't small benefits. These are competitive advantages that can transform your business. So here's my challenge to you. Look at your organization chart, really look at it. Ask yourself, what value is each management layer adding? Are they making decisions that couldn't be made by the people doing the work? Are they providing coaching and development that couldn't be provided through other means? Are they coordinating activities that couldn't be coordinated differently? If the honest answer is no, then you have an opportunity. Start small. You don't have to eliminate your entire management structure overnight. Pick one team or one department. Give them more autonomy. Provide the training and support they need. Create clear accountability for outcomes. See what happens. Learn from the experience. Then expand. Here's a practical starting point. Identify one category of decisions that currently requires manager approval. Maybe it's budget decisions under a certain threshold, or hiring decisions for contractors, or changes to customer deliverables. Pick something meaningful but not catastrophic if it goes wrong. Then give teams the authority to make those decisions autonomously for 90 days. Track what happens. Measure the speed of decisions, the quality of outcomes, and how people feel about the change. I'm willing to bet you'll see improvements across the board. And involve your current managers in the redesign. They have valuable insights about what's actually needed versus what's just bureaucracy. Some of them will become your biggest champions for change once they realize they can have more impact in different roles. Others will help you identify the genuine coordination and development needs that you'll need to address in new ways. And here's what I've learned after years of helping organizations make this transition. The companies that thrive in the coming decades won't be the ones with the best management systems. They'll be the ones that figured out how to unleash the potential of every single person in their organization. That's the real competitive advantage. Not control, but trust. Not hierarchy, but collaboration. Not management, but leadership everywhere. It's about less management and more leadership distributed throughout the organization. It's about trusting people to do great work when you give them the authority, the information, and the support they need. It's about building organizations that are fast, flexible, and fundamentally more human. If you're intrigued by these ideas and want to explore how they might apply to your organization, we'd love to continue the conversation. Head over to BBRCMLLC.com to learn more about our approach. You can schedule a free strategic diagnostic by connecting with us right there on the website. The link is in the description. Or if you have questions, just email us at info, that's info, at BBRCMLLC.com. We're here to help you think through these challenges and design solutions that work for your unique situation. Thanks for listening today. Until next time, keep questioning the status quo and building organizations where people can do their best work.